Hey guys, Ken Smith Fishing. So this is the fifth of 5 interviews with Todd Driscoll, updating us on the telemetry study on Toledo Bend. They're doing it at Fork too, but Todd's updating us on Toledo Bend. This particular one, he's going to talk about what that 8-pounder is doing, and it's an 8 to 9ish pound fish that they tagged this spring in May, I think, and it did some weird stuff, some stuff that made it pretty dang hard to catch. And it's fascinating. So this will be the last of this series. We will be back in touch with Todd probably in January, so he can tell us what they observed through the fall transition and what these fish did. So stick around. We're going to talk to Todd all the way through this process to see what these fish do across all seasons. These batteries should last 2 years in these fish, so we're going to get to see them through the fall, through the winter, through the spawn, going back into post-spawn. It's going to be really interesting. Milestone for me this week, thanks to you guys. I hit 2 million views on YouTube. Now I know for some of YouTubers that's not a lot, but that's a lot for me. I was at 1 million this summer, so it's blown up. You guys have done so much for me in sharing my videos and talking about my videos, and thank you to all you guys. I hope to go to 3 million just as quick as I got to 2 million. So I will have for you, I tell you what, let's go to the video, and when we come back, I'll close this and I'll tell you what I got for you next week. All right, guys, so this is the last part. This is early October 2020. We're talking to Todd Driscoll, Texas Park and Wildlife biologist, specifically about the telemetry study. There's been several parts. I think this is the 5th or 6th part. I'm just chopping these up as we're doing them. I'll tell you right there what video this is, and you can see at the top there's a playlist of all these videos. But we've talked about kind of everything you've observed, but you said you got some tidbits for us. So let's talk a little bit about the things we haven't talked about so far. And as you know, I'm dying to know all I can about this gigantic. I mean, an 8-pounder is a great big fish. It'd be personal best for a lot of people. So.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that 8-pounder has demonstrated some pretty interesting behavior. I mean, maybe a little bit counterintuitive to what most of us think. You know, we talked about the lack of vegetation overall at Toledo Bend. There's just not much there. That 8-pounder.
But is there Salvania in Housen?
No, not much at all.
Okay.
No. That 8-pounder we caught in 7 or 8 feet of water. That wasn't really anything unusual, but for the first, this was in, so we tagged that fish around the 1st of May. For the first, I'm going to say at least 3 tracking events, maybe 4, so that's 6 or 8 weeks of time there. I mean, water temps are already really hot. I mean, they're mid-80s, even warmer than that. I remember towards the tail end of this behavior. But shortly after tagging, that fish had moved back into a pocket so far back in there that honestly I wouldn't have been fishing there during the peak of the spring spawn, is how far back that fish was in there. One of the reasons it was there is because there was a lot of, the vegetation is actually called water primrose. Tracking event, so who knows what it's doing while we're not over there. But for 6 to 8 weeks, that fish stayed in that 1 to 3 feet of water up under that gator grass.
Crap, that's not what I would
Water
expect.
temps towards the end, I remember that they were in the high 80s. That fish was still in there.
What is that fish?
I mean, it was good cover, but man, the water, kind of had a nasty brownish color to it, super hot. And a fish that big, I mean, like you say, a fish of a lifetime for a lot of people, was back there in that super shallow water. And what was really interesting about that behavior, I was actually out on Rayburn fishing. We talked about the Floyd tag and my cell phone number. A retired gentleman caught that fish and called me right away, thank God. I mean,
he caught it after it had been tagged?
Yes.
Okay.
This was, I think maybe just 2 to 3 weeks into it. I mean, shortly after the surgery, he caught it. And was kind enough to call us right away. I mean, that 8-pounder, I mean, all these tagged fish are valuable, but an 8-pounder, a telemetry 8-pound fish, I mean, that's like gold for us.
Absolutely.
So he calls, and of course I'm super concerned because he had actually not known what to do with it. He was in a small bass tracker type boat, and he had it in his live well for at least 20 or 30 minutes, so I was kind of concerned about the live well conditions. Of course, I go to talking to him about it, and he generally tells me where he was and the type of cover. Man, he said, man, I was fishing gator grass. And I said, let me guess before you even go to telling me, was that fish 8 or 9 pounds? And he said, it absolutely was. Of course, I knew that because of the tracking and where that fish was, and there was just so little gator grass in there at the time that not only was it unusual behavior, but it was caught back there in that very shallow water.
You say how you caught it?
On a frog.
That's what I would have guessed.
Yeah, I think, I don't remember 100% for sure, but I think he caught it on a frog.
But he released it, and it's still kicking.
Yes, I explained to him that what was going on, and boy, he was super concerned about the welfare of that fish, and I told him if he would, he had already moved. I mean, I was in and out of cell service, so my voicemail just beeped. I'd missed his call. I called him like 20 minutes after he tried to call me. He had already moved a couple miles away. But I told him how important the study was, and he voluntarily took it right back to where he had caught her. And then for the next 4 to 6 weeks after that, that fish was still right there, hadn't moved the lake. Now, after that period, the lake finally fell enough to where the fish, I think, finally thought that, there ain't but 8 to 12 inches of water back here. I got to go somewhere. Well, it's one of those fish that the only place it has been, and I might have mentioned it earlier, is on these indescript flats. That 8-pounder has never moved what you and I'd call traditional structure at all. It's, been 100 to 300 yards away from any type of depth change or drain. But it's been on these premier, biggest pieces of woody cover, big stump or big laydown type of things. But it has this fish and 2 other fish. There hasn't been much movement, like we talked about earlier, but 3 total fish, including this 8-pounder, seem to have 2 different areas they like to be. One was this gator grass. The other place was clear in the back of Housen on one of these flats I'm talking about. But we had documented, we're talking like maybe 2 miles, 1.5 miles, 2 miles of distance, where it would stay in that gator grass. Then just between one tracking event to the next, it had moved 2 miles back on this stump. It stayed there for 2 or 3 tracking events. And then what did it do recently? Went right back close to that gator grass area, but just out in 8 feet of water on a piece of wood.
But still a big home range. To me, 2 miles?
It seems like when the fish moves, it moves a considerable distance, but it has 2 small little general areas it likes to be. Not 1, but 2. And a couple other fish have shown that same exact behavior, where they've got a couple areas they like to be. And for whatever reason, who knows, they decide, it's time to move. And they move to what sure seems to be a known previous area that it just likes to be, and it'll hang out for a couple, 3, 4 weeks, and then it'll decide to move back to the other area. It's pretty fascinating to see.
Did the water come back up, or did it stay down?
No, there was no. The water was on just a slight drop.
Yeah.
Nothing to really impact that type of behavior.
Did I remember have any of these fish moved out of Housen that you have tracked? Have you been able to find them outside of Housen?
Yes. 2 of the fish have moved clear out to the river, clear out there off Community Hole Flats. They've moved clear out there. And,
Are they living on the river then?
They've been out there for a period of a few weeks. I think one of those fish moved back into Housen. The other one has stayed out there. I think I talked about earlier, we've only documented 1 known fish that completely left any of our target area. And to do that, it had to have moved considerable distance, because our study area where we tagged all the fish is Housen Bayou. Draw a line at the mouth of it, north to south, inside the embayments where all the fish were tagged. But our tracking area is 2 or 3 miles outside of there. We're running up to past White Oak Creek boat ramp area, up to really what would be the south mouth of Indian Mounds.
Sure.
And then down clear Community Hole Flats, clear out there where the boat lane kind of bees a couple miles away out there. So we're looking at all that country. And one of our fish traveled way outside there and stayed out there for 5 or 6 weeks, and just now came back in, I guess, 3 weeks ago. Who knows where it was? We know it left and went a considerable distance somewhere. Where we found it again was right where it had been before, 6 weeks prior.
Guys, so important, guys, if you catch one of these fish and transport it for a tournament, to let Todd know. Because
Yeah.
that could have been, I mean, you don't think maybe it was, but it's so important to make that phone call. And say,
Absolutely, call, you know, when you're in a tournament, of course, we don't expect you to release the fish. I mean, you're in a tournament, you catch the fish legally, hey, it is what it is. But call us and at least let us know that that fish has been moved outside a house.
or beg the tournament director to let you take it back.
Absolutely.
I mean, that'd be sick. I mean,
Right, yeah.
tournament directors want to know this just like we do,
Yeah.
right? They really do.
But that one fish that made all that movement, you know, we had found it 2 or 3 tracking events in a row. It was a deep fish. It was on the main bayou, pretty much kind of out in front of Fin and Feather there. We found it 2 or 3 times in a row, and then went like 6 weeks, maybe 8. It's gone. 8+ weeks later, we find it, and it's within 100 yards of where we had it before.
And so you said this thing, you can hear stuff underwater more than a mile. So it had moved a long way.
Oh yeah, I mean, again, we're tracking fish clear outside of Housen 2 or 3 miles, like I explained.
Where did he? That's crazy.
Yeah. There's almost no way it was inside Housen and us not detect it. I mean, we almost have too far of detection. It gets confusing. We might be getting hits on 4 or 5 fish at a time.
So is it just slight frequency differences in all the different transmitters?
Yeah, we have a receiver. Each fish has its own frequency, so we can dial in a specific frequency. When we're in search mode, it's in scan mode. It's on a certain frequency for 4 seconds and it changes.
Okay.
So we can run on play until we get a beep, and then we hone in on it. But sometimes we get over a scan of 4 or 5 different frequencies, 4 or 5 hits on fish. My point is our detection distance is so far, it's almost a detriment.
Yeah.
So the chance of a fish being in Housen and us not finding it is slim to none.
Wow.
I guess maybe another interesting point is, you know, to one of the points I made originally, do some of these fish move way out in totally unpredictable places? One, maybe. I mean, I based on our evidence, I doubt it was away from traditional type depths and structure, because we've yet to document a fish out in what I would call the middle of nowhere or no man's land, like suspended 20 feet down over 45 feet of water. We've not yet found that one time. Every fish location has been in traditional depths that we would target bass in. We've not documented one single fish that's been just out where you would say, you know what, there's just no way anybody would even consider fishing here. So
then that begs the question, if you caught that kid who caught all those fish out there suspended, what would happen if you tracked those fish? You still got to believe they live where fish traditionally, where we think they traditionally live.
yes, and based on what I read of his fishing during that tournament, I think, best I remember, he was in traditional depths.
He was out
around
in front of
drops.
Indian Mound, yeah.
You know, but he was just fishing for suspended fish. Well, certainly we've seen a bunch of suspended fish, but they've been in traditional water depths. I was actually expecting maybe to see a few of these fish that just decide, you know what, I'm getting out of here. I'm going out there in the main basin. There's plenty of shad out there. I can drop down 20 feet in this standing timber and 55 feet of water and stay out here all summer.
And nobody will mess with me.
We have not documented that one single time in 124 fish locations. So it seems pretty unlikely that that's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
All these fish are in traditional areas. Now, the indescript flats kind of gets outside of that realm a little bit, but still, I mean, they're in traditional type depths that you would go bass fishing in. They haven't been in just totally complete unpredictable places.
Fascinating.
Now, getting back to a little bit about the shad behavior and the suspended behavior, I meant to mention this earlier. We saw a lot of that during this May through September period, and it peaked and increased starting in July, certainly, when we know fishing gets really tough. And I've always speculated one reason for that is a lot of these fish suspend around shad. They're not concerned about being bottom oriented or really around traditional structure. We're seeing a fair amount of that for sure during this July through September period. You know, at least a quarter of our fish were suspended off the bottom relating to nothing but shad.
And when they suspend off the bottom, do they tend to want to suspend near pole timber, or do they care?
I don't really think we're going to have the detail to know that, but they're relating
But the
around
fish you're
shad.
looking at Are they, do you see them suspended next to stuff? They're just out there.
They're suspending around shad. And
They
it
don't
sure
care.
seems to me, trying to read between the lines through all this behavior, is most of the time when we see that, fish are pretty inactive. And I think as long as they're not being real aggressive towards those shad tend to not really worry about the bass. I think the bass stay just far enough away, and I'm talking about 10 or 15 feet away, that doesn't really affect the behavior of those shad. And then when a bass gets hungry, it has shad right there, it feeds for a brief period of time, and then kind of mimics that behavior for a good long period of time, I think, during the tough fishing months, July, August, September. I think that's why fishing tends to get real tough down here in these southeastern reservoirs, particularly when vegetation is low.
But he keeps that buffet line in sight.
Yes,
He's just hanging out.
just hanging out.
All right, so let's close with this question. Speaking of behavior, what you've observed so far, let's put Todd the biologist on the shelf. Has it changed how Todd the fisherman acts?
Yes, in terms of the frequency that I idle and look for fish. You know, what do we talk about? I mean, right now so far, 29% of the time, it sure seems like the boat and the outboard is affecting that fish's behavior and making them completely leave where the fish was.
So you think now some of those fish you've historically side scanned, when you turn around and fish for them, you spooked them off?
I think I mentioned it in a previous episode. I have firsthand experience of doing that. Now, again, some of those fish might have been white bass on the move anyway.
Sure. Yeah.
But I got to believe it's happened enough times to me that at least some of those times, those have been bass schools. And I've heard other anglers, particularly in super, water clarity could theoretically come into play here. There's a tournament at Lake Amistad, I think, this past year, and I talked to several of those guys that had live scope. And it seemed like they had found out pretty quick in that super clear water that maybe that was happening a vast majority of the time. And they got to where they would stop short. And like we talked in an earlier episode, pull up there with the trolling motor, running live scope, to not run over them with the outboard. And it sure seemed like it made a difference in terms of the frequency of those fish still being there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of the anglers on Rayburn who I believe is one of the best deep anglers, and I'm not going to say who, but he has told me several of his spots he will not approach it with a big motor. He stops 150 yards short, puts a trolling motor down. 150 yards on a trolling motor is a long way.
That is a long way.
And he will go to that spot on trolling motor and make a cast. And he believes that's part of why he catches fish off some of his spots when other guys don't.
You know, so far, it's not most of the time. Let's play the averages. It's about 1 out of 4 times we're seeing it. But that 1 out of 4 times adds up when you're idling how many places in a day.
Do you, so you idle those spots figure 8 twice. Do they usually leave on the first idle? They're going to leave, they leave, or is it sometimes it's second?
Sometimes it's second.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
okay, dude, crap, I'm leaving.
Yeah, we're not recording that, but just thinking through it.
Yeah.
It's not always the first time. Sometimes it's the second. Yeah.
Man, this is good stuff. Maybe visit December, January when you got a little data from the fall.
Yeah, we
All
can
right.
plan on that.
Let's do that.
Sounds
Guys,
great.
there you go. Todd Driscoll, Texas Park and Wildlife, learning and sharing with us stuff that, we've talked about. The only way you know this stuff historically is to catch them, and you're getting to look at them when we're not catching them, and that's how we're going to learn to catch them better. But again, make sure if you catch one of these fish, tell your buddies that fish Toledo Bend, if they catch one of these fish, please let Todd know. His cell number's on that tag, so that and please turn it loose. You catch another one and put it in the frying pan, but catch them, turn them loose, let Todd know you caught them, and there's no reason to retain them if they catch them to call you. Just catch them and call you, right?
Right. Yeah. My number's on that Floyd tag. Catch them, immediately release them at the location to catch, ideally.
Okay, perfect. All right, thanks for spending time with us. This
I've enjoyed it, Ken.
fascinating, man.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah, just I'm gonna go fall out of the boat at Red River looking at my live scope the next couple of days. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll see y'all soon.
Okay, so would you have ever thought that 8-pounder would stay back there in that shallow of water until basically the water fell out from under her? And again, that's why these fish are so hard to catch. If you haven't seen the video, go back, on my Charger video where I'm doing the Charger boat review. I catch a 1031 on a flat on a random laydown. I see the fish with 360 imaging in the root ball and pitch a worm underhanded to that fish and catch it. And it's exactly what Todd's talking about. It's away from where you would normally fish. I was going up there to look for a brush pile with the 360 because it's the Gen 3 360, which at that point I hadn't played with, and I just was like, look at that one, donk. So that's cool. So next week, I've already done Terry Hawkins' Phoenix PHX boat, the 21 PHX. I've not done any of the editing on it yet, but I'll have that review up for you, at least the first part of it next week. And we'll be down at Rayburn getting ready for the Outlaw Outdoors Blue Santa tournament. It's a very inexpensive tournament to fish. It's purely a benefit tournament. So if you're in the area and you want to come down and fish with us, we will absolutely be there. We're looking forward to it. I tell you what, there's some amazing auction items. Matter of fact, I'm going to tell you right now, Cigar Line came through and gave us 6,000-yard rolls of Abrazex that we're going to auction off somehow or another, and you'll get them for way less than retail. Retail on them is 130 to 170 bucks a pop. And we got, Arc gave us rods, we got Daiwa reels, we got some amazing hunts, a red stag hunt, we got all kinds of crazy stuff. And you don't have to be present to do that stuff. Clint's going to put up a thing Monday or Tuesday, probably Tuesday, and I'll get a video up Tuesday talking about this as well, showing you the link where you can check out all the auction items so you don't have to be there to auction on those items. So stick around for that as well. This is going to be a really fun tournament. And Clint and I talked. I think we can raise between 15 and 20,000 bucks for this tournament for a great cause. For, as I said in the prior video, for kids who don't have the Christmas or are not going to have the Christmas we had as kids or that our kids have every year. It's for a great cause. If you want to give to that cause, you can't make it, please reach out to Clinton Outlaw Outdoors, and if you have raffle prizes or if you just want to throw a little cash at it, that's great too. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Sorry for a little commercial there, but I'm big on these benefit tournaments and appreciate all your support. So we will see y'all next week on some more videos, on the PHX video, on a Rayburn video, Rayburn update. Hadn't done one in a while. And then we'll be fishing the Blue Santa tournament. Looking forward to it. Thanks, guys.